BC Clark Limited. Colin, first of all, thanks for being here.
Good to be here, Paul.
So what do investors make of all this? These are the stocks that for a couple of years have dominated the markets. We get all kinds of calls about them on this channel. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously complicated. I think everyone's still trying to figure out exactly what this DeepSeek AI system that came out of China with, allegedly at a very low cost, and the testing suggests that it's on par with many of the leading systems like ChatGPT and Google's Gemini and other systems. So, I think the highest level of concern probably for investors is, I mean, first of all, is this real information? It seems to have been validated by third-party testing. How much was actually spent on this? It appears to be a very low amount. So, on one hand, I think potentially negative for the infrastructure players, which we saw yesterday, whether those be data center players that are providing power for AI, this idea there's going to be a huge demand for power. And I think particularly the chip companies, because those are, these hyperscalers like Meta, Google, Amazon are spending huge billions and billions of dollars each quarter on NVIDIA chips. And if this can be done with less powerful chips at a lower cost, I think the providers of the chips and the backbone are probably most vulnerable. But then on the other hand, people are suggesting, like Meta, for example, yesterday was actually up on the day. The idea, well, if you're running AI systems and your users are actually taking advantage of it, and someone like Meta doesn't have to spend as much money, maybe that's a positive for a Meta or a Google.
What are your thoughts on the huge meltdown in Celestica stock? That's been the Canadian NVIDIA in many ways. The stock is up in a huge way over not only the past year, but a couple of years, and dropped, as we just saw, by 28%.
Yeah, again, not surprising, because they're sort of benefiting from the spending on that backbone and the development of chips and electronics and manufacturing. So I think the end of the day, part of what this highlights is how much good news is built into a lot of these stocks, and the idea that this sort of relatively sort of system that no one had ever heard of, that $5 or $6 million was spent to develop this system, came out of nowhere and knocked hundreds of billions of dollars of market cap off these companies. I think it really suggests there's a lot of good news priced into them, and that shows the vulnerability. So, we haven't been, owners of NVIDIA or Celestica. I just think the multiples and the good news, so much priced in, and it's just hard to know. And I mean, who knows what other piece of news might come out 3 months, 6 months from now that could disrupt this. There's obviously, when you get a lot of technological innovation, very much like we saw in other periods like the tech bubble, things can change very quickly, and one piece of news or one piece of data can, dislodge an industry or a thesis on something. And when multiples are very high and expectations are high, it can have a really dramatic impact on share prices. So, we tend to prefer to participate in, broader, like a company like Google that has many different businesses, a very strong advertising business. AI is only one of the things they do, and so they're not entirely dependent upon this, very hyped up part of the market, I think.
What would you say to investors who are wondering if Celestica or NVIDIA or other stocks are buys today?
To be honest, I would let the dust settle. I mean, I think the information is just too new and hard to know what exactly is happening here and how significant this development is. And, all kinds of tech experts obviously were out opining on this yesterday and talking about, well, this isn't, can we really trust the data? And is the Chinese government behind this? And was it really $5 or $6 million or a lot more money spent on this? So I think it's best in situations like this to let the dust settle a bit, try to get the real information and research and understand what's happening before you sort of jump in and make a rash move in the market. And
what does this tell people about the importance of diversification and not being over-concentrated in a sector like a big, large cap tech?
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. And I mean, it just even highlights I think the concentration in some of the indices. I heard a stat yesterday that 2/3 of the S&P 500 companies were actually up on the day yesterday, and yet the index was down, I think, about 1.4 or 1.5%. So really just highlights the concentration in the index of these top names. So not only do investors need to diversify if they're investing in individual stocks, but I think even if they're investing in an index fund or an ETF, there has to be an awareness that there's a lot of concentration in a lot of these big tech companies in even the S&P 500 ETF, for example. So you may not be as diversified as you think investing in a large ETF like that.
That's Colin Stewart. That's